Speaking of the goat,
The goat.
yeah,
Yes.
you read a Timothy Zahn novel that I hadn't heard of before.
Yes. Well, I listened to the audio version, so I don't don't know if it counts that much, but I guess it does. But yeah, so I listened to the audio version of Star Wars Survivor's Quest, which was published in 2004. Um, so in between Attack of the Clones and Revenge of the Sith. This is so it takes the story takes place, I want to say, like 15-ish years after the events of the Battle of Endor. And it's 3 years since Luke Skywalker and Mara Jade got married. And for those of you who don't know, Mara Jade was she was the assassin for the Emperor. She was called the Emperor's Hand. And then, but when the Emperor died, he gave her one last command, which was to kill Luke Skywalker, and that was in the Thrawn trilogy. Um, Long story short, like I said, she doesn't kill Luke Skywalker, but she ends up marrying him.
Mission failed.
Yes. Screw you, Palpatine. Uh, but yeah, so Luke and Mara get they're off doing these other jobs because Mara is she's after leaving the Empire after the fall of the Empire. Mara goes to work for a smuggler named Talon Card. But since she got married, she's slowly detaching herself from the organization. Luke's helping her out with that, and then they get a message from a planet that Luke and Mara were on during the it was called the Timothy Zahn's duology. So this was like Visions of the Past, and then or Vision, I can't remember what Visions of the Past, Spectre of the Past, or something like those two books. It was about the
Right, where they made a fake Thrawn to try to take over.
right, yeah. And so they're on this planet Neuron. Of course, that's the planet where they, Luke and Mara eventually admit that they love each other, and then Luke proposes to her. But there are a bunch of Chiss that are living there, and the Chiss are Thrawn's people, and they were actually cloning Thrawn at that base, and yeah. um, and but they get a call from Admiral Park, who's part of the Chiss. They call themselves the Empire of the Hand, and they get contacted. Well, at first, their message actually gets intercepted by a guy named Dean Ginsler, and I'll get to him a little bit later.
Before we get too far, for people who aren't aware.
Yes.
Empire of the Hand, basically, Star Wars is divided into a few territories. The Chiss are from the unknown regions, which are unknown because they are always shifting around and impossible to navigate.
Right.
And so they have an empire that's a bit loose, but they kind of almost kind of ends up being like Dune, where you have to have these force sensitive navigators.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
So them being involved with anything in the main galaxy is always kind of unusual.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, and so of course you've also got the New Republic, which they're in the
proper continuity.
Right, in the proper continuity, yeah. And the New Republic is still kind of like picking up the pieces from the whole the Kalmos situation with the Bothans and everything, because they almost there was almost a civil war between in the New Republic. And then of course the Galactic Empire is basically gone. They surrendered to the New Republic. But yeah, so Luke and Mara end up going to Nirwan. They speak with the Chiss Admiral Park, because he tells Luke and Mara that they have found outbound flight, and if you read the other books, Outbound Flight was basically a fleet of dreadnoughts. This was like just before the Clone Wars. They were sent out to explore the unknown regions and get to the farthest edge of the galaxy. But long story short, they ran into Thrawn, and Thrawn destroyed the ships. So the Chiss are basically saying, okay, well, we're gonna make up for what Thrawn did, and we want to recover the ship and the ships, and we want to make amends for everything. So Luke and Mara end up going to rendezvous with the Chiss ship, and then they it's called the Chaff Envoy, and they meet like a couple of the Chiss higher ups. One of them it's called Aristarchus Formby, and then a General Drask. And Formby is, of course, just this very regal Chiss aristocrat, and General Drask is a very gruff and kind of a real jerk of a military commander. But and then, of course, they also have people from the Empire of the Hand that show up, and it's actually the 501st Legion, which was Darth Vader's old Stormtrooper Legion that he had. But now they're with the Empire of the Hand. And then they also meet a group of aliens called, at first they call themselves the what were they? Started with a G. The I don't. They're not the Geonosians. It's definitely wasn't them. But they long story short, they're not who they say they are. And then but then as soon as they get on board the ship, a bunch of stuff starts happening. Like the ships are being sabotaged, and they have all these issues that they're dealing with. And then of course then they meet Dean Ginsler. And of course, Dean Ginsler sells himself as the New Republic's ambassador, but he's not. He's an electrician, and the reason he's there is because his sister, Lorana Ginsler, was on Outbound Flight, and we kind of get into his backstory of how like his parents practically worshiped the Jedi, and all of he and his brothers and sisters were all tested to see if they were being force sensitive, and then they and then of course his sister Lorana was, and they never got to see her, but because Jedi were not allowed to form attachments, and but Dean actually does meet Lorana. If you read the Outbound Flight book, they actually do meet, and he's very cold and mean to her. And so in this book, he's trying to kind of make amends for that. But yeah, so they eventually get to Outbound Flight, and then they find out that there are actually still survivors from who are still there. Some of them, like they're older, and then their descendants are there too. So there's this whole thing going on with who what to do with them, and of course they don't like the Jedi, so they treat Luke and Mara very coldly, and then but long story short, the aliens that they bring along are actually called the Vagari, and they are they want revenge for what Outbound Flight did to their people during the whole Outbound Flight crisis. So you got all of that going on, and then plus, I would say a big highlight, though, of course, is the the dynamic between Luke and Mara. It's a very I'm trying to think how the best way to. they obviously have a lot of they obviously have a love and admiration for each other, but they also have like mutual respect. Um,
Right.
they
'Cause they spent so many years as enemies, then allies before they became lovers.
right, yeah, but
And also in between, Luke ended up hooking up with a lot of very questionable characters.
yes,
As different Star Wars writers tried to make him a love interest with varying degrees of success.
yes, yeah, yeah. There was Callista, and then who's the other one?
So here was Callista the one who was part of that like Force Witch coven where that's like, oh, your mother was one of us or whatever.
I think so. Yeah. Yeah, and I can't remember the other one.
There were a few. None of them lasted more than a book from their
No,
pet author.
right, yeah. Um, but
It was always clearly going to be Mara.
oh yeah, yeah. And is it just me or the good? Because I mean, I've read like a lot of these, expanded universe books. Mara at times comes across as very tsundere.
It's been 20 or 30 years since I read any of them, but like where she just like insists that she doesn't like Luke.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. It wouldn't surprise me if I went back and got that impression, especially as weeb-pilled as I've been since then.
Yeah. Yeah.
I
Well,
wouldn't have had the term for it back then.
right. Yeah. But and then and of course the other thing too is she's very good at kind of like keeping him in check about stuff. Like when he because if you've read all the other books too, like he lets his force powers get a little too much. Like he uses way too much power, and so but then he ends up cutting back on it a little bit, and then whenever he kind of like gets a little like, oh, maybe I can do this, and Mars like, no, don't do that. um but no, this is it's a good read, or a good listen if you listen to the audio version. If nothing else, I mean, you can see what Disney took from us.
Yes, it's the expanded universe had its issues, but actually this is kind of my realization about a lot of those expanded universes like Star Wars or Star Trek novels, American comic books, things like that,
Yeah.
is that you're kind of there because you fall in love with the characters at a formative age and you like the idea of seeing them continue on.
Yeah.
You kind of accept a certain amount of inconsistency because of it's like a bunch of different authors and you have people trying to make sense of everything on the editorial side.
Yeah.
Um, but what's united all of these efforts is that they were relatively cheap to produce.
Yes.
uh, Instead of being hundreds of millions of dollars of Disney Plus or streaming shows.
Yeah, yeah. It doesn't cost much to write and publish a novel.
So it's like the whole decision to start trying to make movies like Rogue One Rogue One is a fine movie, but
Yeah.
in terms of its importance to the universe, it's basically a spin-off novel.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
And like Solo is actually kind of reminded me of the Solo trilogy from the old universe days, just worse.
Yeah.
In part because they didn't have enough time to stretch it out.
Right. Yeah.
But instead of paying one author like a year to write 3 novels or however long it takes them, you instead spend or pay Lord and Miller to make it 90% of the way, then Ron Howard to make it again.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
and I get that if you can make another Marvel movie series where you can just come out with a new movie 2 or 3 times a year and make $1 billion a year off of it, that's very appealing. But I think that for franchises like Star Wars, like just a novel like this is the best way to move the story forward or fill in gaps.
Yeah.
Because it will appear to the type of nerd who actually wants to keep up on everything about Luke Skywalker because they love Luke Skywalker.
Right. Yeah,
As
exactly.
opposed to like the general public's attention span for a lot of things is, a set of movies once or a decade or two. That's about my attention span for Star Wars.
Yes. Yeah. 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 Star Wars was never meant to be like a Marvel like franchise. They were event movies. and then Disney came in and just like more.
Yeah.
And then and on top of that, they decanonized Mara Jade.
Look, you've seen how they treated Thrawn in animation and live action.
That's
Do
true.
you want to see their version of Mara Jade?
No, you're right. No, I don't want to see the version of Mara Jade. They would mess it up. Yeah, they'd mess her up badly. You know, they'd make her. They would turn her into a girl boss.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, and the other problem is that they wouldn't really have Luke for her to interact with, so she'd be off there with Ahsoka or whatever. In fact, it would be unsurprising to me if she showed up in Ahsoka season 2 as a new character.
Yeah.
I think the only thing that keeps that from happening is that Dave Filoni doesn't want another powerful female character taking attention away from his own OCs.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, Filoni's a hack.
Yes, unfortunately.
I said it. I said it. Type mean comments. I don't care.
Yep.